This is the Lemokey P1 Pro. It's a premium wireless mechanical keyboard made by Keychron. But is it worth it? Let's find that out. But before we get into the video, I do want to mention that this keyboard was sent out to me by Keychron, but I am not being paid, and every opinion given is mine and mine alone. So without further ado, let's get into the unboxing of the P1 Pro. So the first thing you see when opening the really solid feeling box is a quick start guide showing how to connect it to your PC and a few other things. Under the thick piece of foam is a manual, and under that is the keyboard itself in a soft plastic bag. But for now, we're going to set that off to the side. On the back of the box are a few accessories, with the first being a decently long USB-C to USB-A cable, a few extra keycaps, 2 screwdrivers to presumably take apart the keyboard, a USB-A to USB-C adapter, a little baggie of rubber gaskets, a pretty standard branded keycap and switch puller, and the 2.4 GHz dongle. So with all that out of the way, let's get into the build of the Lemokey P1 Pro. When first looking at the P1 Pro, you'll likely notice the super premium and sleek design, which comes a lot from the matte black case. Made from a super solid feeling aluminum alloy, the case of the P1 Pro comes in at almost 4 pounds, which gives it an even more premium feel to go along with its look. The edges are nicely rounded off, which makes handling it a lot less of a painful experience, and the aluminum it's made from has a super soft finish to it. The sides of the keyboard don't really have much going on, which I personally really like. However, the back of the keyboard does have a little indented slot with the Lemokey logo, a switch to choose between using the keyboard wired, through the Bluetooth 5.1 mode, and through the 2.4 GHz mode. And to the left of that is a USB-C port, which is used to charge the 4000 mAh battery, which can last a surprising amount of time from my experience. But the USB-C port can also be used to use the keyboard wired, as I'm sure you guessed. Moving to the top of the keyboard are the keycaps. They're made from a double-shot PBT material, which makes them resistant to fading and wearing. And along with that, they also have a nice slightly textured feel to them. One thing I did notice about them though, is that just by taking the enter keycap off, the keycap puller somehow dented the keycap itself, which isn't a great sign. And it's not like I used a weird third-party keycap puller, it's the one that came in the box. And it's definitely not a deal breaker, and obviously you can change the keycaps even if you wanted to, but it is something you should probably keep in mind. Other than that, the keycaps are cherry profile, which along with Keychron's OSA profile are some of my favorites. Depending on the color of the keyboard that you choose, the keycaps can come in a range of colors. I personally chose the black version, which has a black and dark gray look with a beautiful shade of red for the enter and escape key. Although if you prefer there to be no accent color on the keyboard, extra black keycaps do come in the box, which is nice, as well as a few more red ones if you want to add more red to the keyboard. Before we move on from the top of the keyboard, there's also a nicely rounded knob at the top right, which lets you mute your PC's audio with a click, as well as turn your PC's audio up or down depending on which way you turn it. You can also fully customize the knob in the software, which we'll go over a little later in the video. At the bottom of the P1 Pro are 4 small rubber feet to prevent it from sliding around. But due to the weight of this keyboard, even without those feet, I'm sure you wouldn't have to worry about it sliding around at all. Unfortunately for some people, there are no adjustable feet at the bottom. However, the 5.5-degree typing angle is quite comfortable. In the center of the bottom of the case, there's also a beautiful metal plate, which has a really nice layered design to it. It also has a satisfying peel to it, which is also a plus. And unlike the rest of the case, it's quite fingerprint resistant, so it'll almost always look nice. And while you won't normally see the bottom of the keyboard, it's still nice to have. The top plate of the P1 Pro is made from a polycarbonate plastic, which allows you to get the most out of the gasket mount. Which, speaking of, the gasket in this keyboard is actually quite noticeable, making the typing experience feel extremely bouncy and soft. In addition to being gasket mounted, there's also a plethora of silicone and foam pads throughout the entire case, which makes this keyboard sound really full and gets rid of any pinging sounds that can come from a metal case. And when it comes to switches, you could choose between 3 when buying the keyboard, which are all made by Keychron themselves. There's the super red switches, the super brown switches, and the super banana switches, with the last 2 being tactile and the first one being linear. I personally have the reds in my P1 Pro, which I'm going to specifically go over today. The linear, which I just mentioned, are pre-lubed, as are all the other super switches, have a lifespan of around 50 million clicks, have a full travel distance of 4 millimeters, and have an impressive lack of key wobble. With all that being said, here's a quick sound test of the P1 Pro with red switches. The PCB in the P1 Pro is hot swappable for 3 and 5 pin switches, which means you could just pop out the ones that came with the keyboard and put in any ones that you want. When it comes to the stabilizers, they're screwed into the PCB, which adds a bit of stability and are pre-lubed. Because of that, they feel super smooth and don't have any scraping or ticking at all. Although on my keyboard at least, I wish the spacebar had a little bit more lube, but overall, they feel incredibly smooth and I'm completely satisfied. Under the switches on the PCB are the south-facing RGB diodes. They get decently bright, can be changed to any color you can possibly think of, and have a lot of effects you can choose from on the Keychron's web software, which we'll fully go over in a second. The P1 Pro has a pulling rate of 1000 Hz when used through the 2.4 GHz dongle and when being wired, which in my opinion is the perfect amount and you'll rarely ever need more than that. Through Bluetooth, the pulling rate is 90 Hz, which is a little lower than other Keychron keyboards that I've tested. But you can't really expect much when it's Bluetooth, and if you're using Bluetooth, I'm sure you know what that's like. The battery life from the 4000 mAh battery is pretty great, considering I've been using it as my main keyboard for a little over a week, and I've only needed to charge it once, which is completely understandable, especially since the keyboard obviously didn't come fully charged. I do want to preface that I do prefer and use the keyboard with no RGB, which can bring the battery life up a lot, but overall the battery life has been great. The one not super impressive thing is that it only charges at 5 watts. Which can take up to 5 hours to charge from 0 to 100. But as I've said with every other Keychron keyboard that I've used, considering how long the battery life lasts, this isn't really a problem. When it comes to software, the Lemokey P1 Pro uses Keychron's web-based software, which in my opinion is one of the best out there. One thing I'm really happy that this keyboard does with the software, unlike their Hall effect keyboards, which is it can be customized without plugging it into your computer. In the software, you can customize and change any key you'd want to be almost anything, whether it be a media key, lighting control, a custom macro which you can make in the software, or even a key that otherwise wouldn't be available on a keyboard of this form factor. You can completely customize this knob's input, or what it does when turning it to the right or left, which can actually be super useful. In the launcher, you can also customize the lighting, as I've showed you earlier, as well as test your switches to see if they're working correctly. When buying the Lemokey P1 Pro, you have the option to buy it in the Pro version, which is the wireless version that I have, and the non-Pro version, which can only be used wired. There's a bare bones version to use if you're buying this for a custom build. You can choose between 3 different colors: black, navy blue, and silver. And lastly, you can choose between 3 different switches, which I went over earlier. The Lemokey P1 Pro comes in at a super impressive price of $130, which for what you get is kind of crazy. Personally, I love this keyboard and I really think you will too. So whether you watch this video for entertainment or you're actually looking for a keyboard to buy, I appreciate you being here. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next videos.